was actually surprised when the work went up how all the pieces are actually quite interrelated, because I work on one piece and then an idea could go in various directions. So I do another piece, smaller piece, and that would lead somewhere else. Or I actually would start with a smaller piece and that, something from that would go into the larger pieces. And this piece behind us, the texture of time, it actually comes about as a result of the other large piece, the echo and the architecture of time. In that one I had a figure who's looking up through the banister up above, and in this one I started with here, the stairway, and I actually initially it had a figure who's looking up, so it's exactly the same figure, but we're looking from a different vantage point. And even on the other side of it, this telescope which is coming out, you'll see in the other one in the echo and the architecture, I have the telescope actually looking into the painting, or seeming to be pointing out in the opposite direction, so it's almost as if it's puncturing through and coming, this is out the other end of it. And that's sometimes how ideas develop in the pieces. Okay, so this one here, this was the actual initial piece that I was talking about, the echo and the architecture of time. So you'll see here, this was the stairwell, and this was the figure I was talking about who's looking up. So in the other painting, it was initially going to be a figure who was from down below looking up, the same figure, so it was kind of like all the same space in a certain sense. And this here is the other end of the telescope, looking through the other end of the telescope, so almost as if it was pushing through, and like it's the other end of the painting itself. And a lot of things changed in my paintings. Like I started with a totally different idea, which is actually in one of the other smaller pieces that was here, and I was working out the problem of trying to see that figure from that vantage point, and then this whole thing develops. I don't know. Oh, this piece here is actually the other one, the texture and the architecture of time. I mean, now I'm getting my titles mixed up. This piece here is related to the texture of time. So this was actually the figure that was going to be looking up the stairs. And if you see in the other one, I actually changed it. Another figure came pushing through into the space of the painting from outside. And that happened because of I think it was necessary for the larger piece, for the working out of the composition. Okay, so this piece here, the other of the three large pieces, is called the Tower of Babel, and how it relates to the others. In the first one, I thought I was going to have the Tower of Babel in the background, and it didn't end up happening. It went in another direction. And then the second one, I thought the same thing, that I would have him in there, and it didn't happen. So then I started a whole piece which went around the whole idea of the Tower of Babel. And also in this piece I have like the figures, they're looking at a book, an art book of the Tower of Babel, which is a takeoff on, or taken from Bruegel's painting of the Tower of Babel, plus ideas of the Colosseum in Rome. So it's as if they're tourists visiting the painting itself. And the other, you'll see another figure, he's taking pictures of the painting, or of the actual, as if they found the real place in the world. This is actually one of the few times that I've actually done a study for a painting, and this is a study for the Tower of Babel. And I did it in acrylic on paper. And so you'll see a lot of things have changed between the two, or there's a slight shift. For example, I have like our little puppy Piccolo there, and in the other piece he becomes a lot bigger and more obscure as to what exactly it is. But you'll see some of the same stuff, but everything's slightly shifted, and I put in the figures in the balcony with the book, and then put in a villa in the background, and slightly shifted the whole space of it. have another set of pieces that are in the show that aren't quite related to the others. There's no real immediate subject matter or easily recognized forms. So a lot of people might think initially that they're abstract, but for me they're not abstract, they're just very open. And I wanted to create something that seemed very real and tangible, that they were real objects, not just abstract forms, and yet they were very incomprehensible, that you couldn't quite understand what they were, as if you were viewing something from another world, another planet that you couldn't relate to. So another aspect of these smaller pieces is sort of a liminality of meaning, that they're shifting. What I mean by that is they're shifting in their meaning. Like when you wake up in the middle of the night or early in the morning and you open your eyes and you see something in front of you that can't possibly be there, some giant forms, and your mind is constantly trying to put everything in its proper place, and it takes maybe a few minutes of struggling with your interpretation of the forms, and you suddenly realize that something that you read as being in front of you or being attached to something else is actually totally disconnected. It's the space behind it that you read in front of you or whatever. So I wanted to create also that idea of that point where there's that instability, or that your mind is constantly shifting back and forth, or even like the duck-rabbit idea, but you're right in the middle between the duck and rabbit. You don't see the duck or the rabbit yet. You're in the middle, suspended between duck and rabbit.